In this video, I'm going to tell you how to make more sales and therefore more money. I'm going to spin around on my chair and Jet the editor will edit googly eyes onto me at some point during this video. I don't know when. Enjoy. Checkout sessions are what makes a business owner really happy. But losing a session, oi oi oi. And losing a potential customer because your session wasn't tailored, unattractive, didn't provide the right discounts, it wasn't convincing enough, oi 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 oi. Well, that sucks. But come here. Let me tell you something. Let me spit some facts at you. It sucks because 70% of businesses in the world, they don't actually tailor their checkout experience. When they set up a website, they just go with the checkout experience that already exists and they do nothing about it. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to adjust your checkout experience. But remember one thing, building your own checkout experience, that is an absolute no-no. That is like, What you do is you edit pre-existing websites that already have a checkout build because they've handled all the complex functionality for you. You just make it look nice and pretty and you add something called a service provider. And in today's example, a discount checkout provider, where we will be making a custom discount to sell bread. If you're interested, well, let's get going and let me show you how to do that. All right, so to get started, I have created a website. Now, I wasn't joking. I am actually going to sell bread. And as you can see, I've called it the bread shop. And I have a beautiful bread image here, or actually the selection of breads that I can hopefully at some point offer. But for this specific example, we're going to work with my most popular bread selection. And I have 4 different breads that I'm selling here. I'm selling a sourdough loaf, a braided challah, a dark rye, and a ciabatta. All in all, this website works great. I can just select the bread. Let's go with the braided challah. And I've got it, and I've got its price, and I've got the amount that's left in stock, the number I want to buy, and so on. That's not important. I just want to buy it. And as you can see, this bread is £7.50. And again, I want to go back and maybe I want to buy another bread, maybe a ciabatta. And I'll add this to my cart. And what you'll notice is that we're building this checkout right here. And I can view this card and essentially go ahead and check out and pay for this order or edit my quantities and so on. Now, what happens if, for example, I have 2 bread or 3 bread or 4 bread and I want to make sure and validate that my checkout meets my exact conditions and that I can actually perform some cool enhancements for the user to essentially upsell the order to them. This is the way we're going to keep it for now. And I'm going to go into my actual Wix Studio website and I'll show you how to edit this. Now, this is essentially just a template I have taken, and I've just added my basic own products into it. Nothing complex at all. Now, here is the great thing about Wix Studio in this case. Now, for anyone who is a developer, or anyone who's in marketing, or anyone who's in UI design and just design in general, you have so much flexibility here. But specifically the developers that are watching this, you've got the functionality to really change everything. Because in itself, for example, if you want to upsell and make it bespoke, well, this checkout is somewhat limited. You can only do a certain amount of things, but what if you want to make it really bespoke, right? Well, the great thing about Wix Studio is you have this code mode here, and you can start coding using the developer mode. And the great thing here is now suddenly you can actually write code and you can edit what you're going to be doing on this page to give yourself a custom functionality. Now, in this tutorial, we're not necessarily going to be coding as such. I'm just going to take little bits of code that I pre-coded and I'll explain them to you. And in the next video, we're going to dive into creating a few service providers that we will actually code up live so you can actually get the full experience of how things work and see the variation that we can offer here and how much flexibility we can have. But for this instance, we're just going to paste in code and I'll go ahead and explain. Now, let's talk about service providers. If we go into our backend and public tab here, as part of creating a website, you're creating a store that sells the items that you own and you want to sell on to other people. And here at the bottom, you have something called service plugins. Now, if I press the plus button, you'll see the type of service plugins that we have. And essentially, this is the type of enhancements that we can do to make our checkout experience much better. Things like changing shipping rates, making the payment option, functions, showing things with the catalog, adding additional fees for things that the user might need, doing the custom discounts, which we're going to be doing today, offer some more validation, make sure that there is validation in your checkout to make sure that someone doesn't pay when they don't have to. There's a lot of them. Now I'm going to create the custom discount and I'm going to call it multi-bread. So we're going to be trying to sell multiple loaves of bread. I'm going to add and edit this code. And now as part of this code, we get two files. We get the multibread.js file, where essentially we can just ignore that. We don't really have to put anything in there, so I'm not going to go ahead and actually explain it. The only thing that we need to change here is just return an empty object here, and then we just forget about this file, so we can just close it. This is the file that we're going to be focusing on. And realistically, if I just get rid of all this information, these are the two export functions that we're going to be working with. And those are the export functions that we actually need to make this custom discount work. Let me just explain how this custom discount is going to work and how it actually works with the Wix Studio. Now, essentially, you create a list trigger. It's essentially a trigger, a point at which your statement and the checkout is going to be exactly the way you want it, and then you're going to apply, in this case, this discount. Now, in general, what you have within Wix is something called automatic discounts. You can create automatic discounts to offer some kind of basic discount functionality. Now, I'm going to call this just bread test. And here what we can say is we can apply it to all products. We can have a minimum quantity of items. Let's say, well, I can have 2 items. And then if I have 2 items, well, then I can, for example, give an amount off. And I'll say I'll drop the price of each item by £1. And that's kind of the custom discount that I'm offering here. But the minimum quantity of items doesn't mean unique items, for example. We can have just 2 items. So if I refresh this, which is my checkout, you'll notice that the price went down by £1. Now I can have 2 items of the braided chala, and I can have none of the ciabatta, and it has a minimum amount of items, so I still get this discount. But again, what if we want to extend the functionality of the minimum that is just offered here and do a little bit more? Well, let's just get rid of this, delete this, and let's go back to our Wix Studio. Well, first of all, we need to create a trigger. It's a trigger that's essentially an identifier that is going to get triggered when we match our if statement. Now I'm just going to copy that in with the nice comment that I've made. And here is what we have. We return a custom trigger, and then as part of the custom triggers, you can have more than one, but in this case, we just have one, which is an object, and here we pass in a unique ID. I just give it 1, and I gave it a name called you will buy 4 bread. And like I said, you will. Now, the next thing we need to do is we actually need to work on the logic of how we are going to make our trigger function and how we're going to find out if we have 4 unique breads and how much breads we have in our checkout and whatnot. Well, for that option, we have 2 parameters that get naturally passed in here. We have the options and the context. Now, the options is what we're actually interested in because the options provide us the actual checkout and the information about the current checkout that the user might have. Now, I'm printing options here because, like I said, options is essentially returning everything that's currently in our checkout. And we'll need that information to be able to configure and write, or in this case, code our rules. Now, I'm going to insert the rest of the code. Now, don't get too scared. I'm going to go through it line by line. It's very, very, very simple. Now, one of the things we're going to see here, and we're going to return to this, it's when we print our options, we get a JSON object, which is the checkout, and the checkout is represented as a JSON. And as part of the JSON, as part of the options, we have other keys that we can reference there. In this case, one of them is triggers, the other one is line items, and you'll see this in a second when we actually look at the logs. Now, the next thing we need to do is actually configure a trigger. Now, we can have more than one trigger that we might want to apply to a specific kind of discount functionality that we're going to make. So in this case, we need to actually run over all the triggers that are contained within our options that are available in that checkout and pick the trigger that we like. In this case, we have one, but we may have more than one. So in this case, we set up a variable called trigger and we iterate over the triggers, which is an array that's provided to us from the checkout. And we look for all the specific triggers and we find the trigger that has the ID of 1. This is the trigger that we want to apply for this specific discount. And as you can see, before we define the triggers that we provide, and one of them we only have called you will buy bread, or you will buy 4 bread, and that has the ID of 1. So this is exactly what we're looking for here and setting trigger to this specific trigger of buying the 4 bread. Now, as part of the actual if statement and the conditions that we're going to be checking when we have the bread, well, what do we have to check for? Well, first of all, the rule that we want to apply is that we want to have 4 different types of bread that we want to buy. So if I go ahead and I'll change the checkout to 4 bread of one type, that will not work. We need 4 different types of bread. So if we actually go back to our home, let's give ourselves and let's add the 4 different types of bread to our checkout. So let's add the sourdough, let's add the dark rye, and let's add this ciabatta. Now let's actually visualize when our discount trigger will work. Well, will it work in this example that we have when we have 4 different types of bread? Well, actually, you might think it will, but no, it won't, because we have quantity of the braided challah is 4. It's more than we want. What we want is 4 different types of bread and the overall quantity of the bread to be 4. And this is the only time when that condition will be met. So only when we have 4 different types of bread and the quantity of our full checkout is actually 4, then only we will apply that specific discount. So going back into our code, here we go over the total quantity. Now, light items essentially has all the items in the checkout. So it has all these different types of bread. This is what we're iterating over. And we're using a nice reduce function. A reduce function, essentially, we can provide it a specific item that we're iterating over, and we can create a sum of everything that we have, a unique sum of everything that we have. And in this case, we create a unique sum of the quantities of the items that we have. Now, each checkout will have an item, and it will provide a quantity, and it will provide a price. So it's all the information that we see here. The name, the price, the quantity, that's all we get as part of each item that we iterate over. And we're doing a collection on the quantity and seeing the total sum of all these items in the checkout. And that's what reduce does. And essentially, this should give us 4. That's the total quantity of the bread. Now, the next thing we need to define is the unique types of bread that we have. And now, as part of the line items, so the items in the checkout, we want to map over each item and get their catalog ID. So the unique identifier for, in this case, the bread that we're working with. But we're wrapping it in a new set. Now, a set in JavaScript essentially allows us only to have unique items. What does that mean? Well, that means that even if we iterate over an item and there is multiple catalog IDs that reference the same type of item, it will only store one of those IDs and remove all the other duplicates. So therefore, we iterate over line items, get all the catalog IDs that we have, and find all the unique values. And if those unique values, well, then they could get contained as an array. And if those unique values, essentially, there is 4 of them, we know that we have 4 different types of bread. And then it's just as simple as setting a variable called result, and then writing what's most important is our if statement stating, well, when do we want to match and when do we want to trigger this discount, which we don't know what discount yet. We'll go to configure that in a second. But what if statement and what conditions do we want to meet for this discount to actually take place? Well, we need to say that we have this set of unique bread. We take the size of it and we want it to equal to 4. So 4 different types of unique bread. And the total quantity of all the breads in the checkout should also be 4, whether or not they're the same type of bread or not. And then we just sum up the result. We sum up the eligible triggers for this specific condition. And we're saying, well, we want to take that custom trigger and we want to work with this custom trigger identifier. If it's not the case, well, the eligible triggers will be nothing and we return the result. Now we can actually go ahead and publish this. Now, if we publish something successfully, you'll get this log saying your site was published with an item of a specific trigger. If this site works, well, then the options console log should start printing. So let's see if we actually change and adjust the quantity. In this case, let's change some items here and see if it works. And maybe let's remove an item in this case. See if anything changes, if we get any logs. We don't, because this custom trigger that we have written here called multi-bread has not actually been added to the website. And the way you add it to the website is by using automatic discounts. Now, all we have to do is just create a discount and just pick a standard discount. And we can give it a name. I'll just call it multi-bread again. And essentially what will happen here is, what does this discount apply to? Well, it should apply to all the products that we have defined. So with the 4 different types of bread. Now, what we actually see here is we get a populated field that doesn't exist previously if you didn't create this discount called custom. It's the custom trigger and rules that we created by ourselves. We are the third party. And we can select the custom requirement here that was written by us and the custom trigger we created. And we can select you will buy 4 bread. That is the one, the custom trigger, the custom discount trigger and service provider that we have listed. And in this case, I'm saying, well, if I meet the conditions in this custom discount trigger, I want to give a percentage of, and that will be 45%. So I want to give a 45% discount if you buy 4 different types of bread and your total quantity of the checkout is 4. And we can save and publish that trigger. Now you can go ahead and see that this multi-bread discount with a 45% off products, if we meet all our specific conditions of having 4 types of unique bread and 4 total quantity of items in the cart, well, it will only be triggered and only then. So we can go into our logging tools, we can adjust the quantity of for example, the braided challah. Does the discount work? Well, no, because we don't match the condition. And if we go into our logging tools, you can see that the options console log that we previously defined in our code has actually populated. And I wanted to show you this. Now, this is the JSON payload that I was talking about and the message of what we get. As you can see, we get line items, which is essentially an array of the items in our cart, showcasing the quantity of that item, showcasing the unique catalog item ID, giving us the price of each item, and so on and so forth, depending on the definitions that we have. But these are the things that we're working with to build that condition and that if statement. Let's go ahead and actually match our checkout so we get that discount. Well, we need 1 of each quantity of item, and then we need to add an item that doesn't exist in the checkout. So the 4th bread. So we have dark rice, sourdough loaf. Let's go back home. We need the ciabatta. So I'm going to add this to cart. And what you'll notice, as soon as I add this to cart, we get that 45% discount applied to our checkout. As soon as that quantity changes, that discount will automatically go away. But as soon as we specifically match the quantity and the number of custom breads in our checkout, we have a custom discount for our users. And now I've sold you 4 bread because the price is much cheaper than sometimes even buying 2. Didn't I say you're gonna buy 4 bread? Yes, I did. And that is essentially how you work with service providers within Wix. It really is that simple. The code isn't really that complex. Once you understand what the code actually means, it's realistically just defining a custom trigger, giving it an ID, and defining a custom if statement that you want to match. Therefore, when that if statement matches, giving it a custom trigger, and just setting up automatic discounts within the automatic discounts portal of the Wix Studio dashboard. And that's basically it. Please let me know if you enjoyed this tutorial. Please let me know if it was helpful. Now, if you're looking forward to learning more, well, make sure you subscribe to this channel to check out the next video where we're going to configure more service providers for Wix Studio to make your checkouts much better. And like I said, you're going to hopefully be making more money by learning a little bit, by adjusting your website to tailor it more to your customer and to your product, and therefore by selling more. Thanks, guys. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video.